to come to it. We have started the conversation before the break. I love it. With two first-timers. Kiharu MP Ndini Nyoro's in the house, as is Nyando MP Jared Okello. Good to have you guys on again. Mheshimiwa, let me go to you first. I understand people in Kiharu are rioting because you voted no.
First of all, Jeff, I want to congratulate all the candidates who set for their KCPE and KCSE in April.
Why are you going to go for that? I mean, why you want to stick to the topic? Or
no, I'm coming there. As you know, Jeff,
okay.
Muranga High School in Kiharu produced the best number one in the country.
Congrats.
And therefore, I must congratulate them for such a good job. Jeff, there were no demonstrations in Kiharu, just some people who are insecure, who tried to bring some youth from other places, to export some youths, to import some youths to Kiharu today, ostensibly to demonstrate, because I voiced the opinion of the people of Kiharu. But of course, it was not successful, because the people of Kiharu actually knew and came in large numbers. Na wakawaambia huyu mtu alivote kwa niaba yetu. And he cast the vote on our behalf.
And you were okay.
And that is where we start.
Na uko sawa na hiyo no?
Niko sawa kabisa, because I voted out of my conscience, Jeff. As you said, I come from Kiharu, the home of Matiba. First of all, I voted no for two reasons. One, the timing in terms of priority, but also number two, in terms of content. In terms of priority, Jeff, I think our country, we have more problems than constitutional problems. I don't think we have a constitutional problem in Kenya. Neither do I think we have a political problem in Kenya. The biggest problem we have in our country is an economic problem.
Okay, stop right there. In Nyando, what did they think about that?
Oh, firstly, Jeff, allow me to say this, that my heart goes out to the families across the country whose lives have been distorted by the current flooding. Many places unprecedented, but for Nyando is perennial. But that doesn't mean that we can sit pretty and cozy as we watch our people under such deluge. It has been too unprecedented the last 2 years, akin to what happened in the year 1963, the worst flooding of its time, that therefore occasioned the government to move other people to higher grounds in Muhoroni, Koru. You were talking about Medika, and there were many others who also went closer to his home. There has been an intervention by the Ministry of Water, certain times patch-ups, when last year they sent 10 excavators to go desilt our rivers and streams. The net effect is that the effect is not as bigger as it has been always. Long-term solution, because that is exactly what our people are waiting to hear. There has been in the works construction of a dam in Korusoin. So far, land has been secured by the Ministry of Lands. Compensation to the landowners has equally been done. They have set aside seed money to the tune of 1 billion to go towards clearing the bushes and setting up, mobilizing machinery and a semblance of work yet to begin. So that is going to be the ultimate solution. You understand that Nyando, which many people have read in history, is in the plains. So sometimes we flood without our own rainwater.
But look at those pictures there. Look at that flooding in your backyard.
Quite disturbing.
Yes.
Quite disturbing. So what we believe in is that once this dam will be erected and operational, the excess waters from the Nandi escarpment will be stored there. And therefore there will be a control of what goes into River Nyando and ultimately to Lake Victoria.
Okay, let's switch
But
gears.
that is not the only problem that we have, Jeff, if you allow me. We've also in the recent past seen Lake Victoria bulging out and trying to reclaim large tracts of land beyond the cut line. So we have like 12 schools that are now submerged underwater. And the government, together with my office, is doing whatever we can to place those children in other higher ground schools, even though far away from their homes, but at least now that education can continue. Remember last year we lost almost the whole year. and they just resumed from their long holiday, this recess. They just began their third term. So we will not allow our children to be stuck at home because of floods. We're going to, just adapt to the situation.
What Mheshimiwa Nyoro said about BBI. Says, he voted with his conscience, no, he said, because, he says it's not necessary at this time.
Right.
That's what he say.
Well, Jeff, if there is anything that we shall credit the handshake for, is the BBI. I mean, the Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, reached out to Uhuru Kenyatta and vice versa, and said, bygones are bygones. The country was undergoing very, very tough times, with politics dividing people deep down the middle. And something had to happen. In their own wisdom, they chose to reach out to each other, oblivious to all of us, including those who perceive to be very close to the powers that be, were kept in the dark. For good reasons, because when two principals, antagonists for that matter, reach out to each other, and you have to consult your handlers first before you go to the other, definitely nothing was going to happen. So in their own wisdom, they reached out to each other, and what we saw was just a culmination of lots of talks that had hitherto happened before the 9th of March. I think that is when they stepped out of the Harambee House. So they then talked about the 9 key areas that have adversely affected our well-being and our relationships with each other. We are fine, even with my brother Ndindi Nyoro here, but wait until elections are nearing. Then we get stratified deep down the middle. And then he automatically becomes Kikuyu, I become Luo. And a country that is subjected to this immense suffering, 1 year before and 1 year after the elections, I mean, when are you going to develop this country? So they said, let us try to identify areas that create division and settle if we can. And of course, some of them would be, legislative. We can do them in our using our own powers in Parliament. Some will be administrative, and others have to be subjected to the referendum. And the Prime Minister said, let us give this country a roadmap that will outlive us, And, history will vindicate me that the Prime Minister has always been mindful of the welfare of this country. More than twice, he has sacrificed his wins for the sake of peace of this country. Certain times picking up the premier position so that the country can move forward. But that is about Raila Odinga. How he sees this nation and the direction it ought to go is not the same way others are seeing it. Yeah, others would say, let us fight.
Others being...
Ndindi Nyoro and company.
No, well, I'm not going to put...
Well, they just said no, but no.
Yeah, but the referendum is going to happen, right? I mean, whether you like it or not. Mahesh?
Jeff, I must explain the reason why I voted no. And first of all, it's a matter of priority. From where I sit, I think the problems bedeviling our country are more economic, because we are trying to sort economic and social issues, of course, through a document, and I don't think such a superficial manner can bring about results. Jeff, we are in the budget making process currently in Parliament, which will be passing, of course, in June. Jeff, in that budget, the revenues in our country is around 1.6 trillion shillings. Out of the 1.6 trillion that we receive from KRA, in terms of taxes, actually the cumulative revenues in our country, 1 trillion shillings is going to debt repayment in terms of principal and interest. Our country has got around 600 billion wage bill without putting the recurrent expenditure that is beyond now the salaries. And therefore, Jeff, the money that we take to our counties, the money that we actually pay our MPs with in terms of salary and funding Parliament, the amount of money that we take to our development kitty, all that money is borrowed. And therefore, Jeff, I think we need to exercise some caution and actually reflect as a country and hit the nail on its head And I think it's being lazy every time, every 10 years, we try to make a document ostensibly to rectify problems that are not on the basis of the document. In terms of content, I have gone through the document, Jeff, and I think we are far off in terms of what we are trying to do. I have listened to my brother Jared talking about fighting after every 5 years. And I think from where I sit, people across the world, I'm an economist, and we say that the laboratory of economists is history. If you check across the world, people fight for 2 reasons. Number 1 is identity, and number 2 is resources. We can sort about the issue of resources by focusing on the productive side of our economy. Currently in the entire BBI, we are trying to address economic issues in terms of distributive, not of course productive. And I think we are departing from where Kibaki left. When Kibaki became president in 2003, our collection in terms of our country, the revenue was around 200 billion Kenya shillings, the entire revenue of Kenya. When he left 10 years later, our revenues were approaching 1 trillion shillings. That's around 5 times, or a 500% increment of our revenues. From the time this regime took over in 2013, from 1 trillion, we have only increased our revenues by 60%, because we are just around 1.6 trillion. Jeff, what we have achieved through this regime in 10 years or 9, Kibaki achieved in half an year. And I think, judging by the histories that have overcome the issues that we are trying to overcome in BBI, they focused on the real issues. Number 1 is resources, I've explained about it. Number 2 is identity. When you talk about identity, Kenya, the reason why we fight, and the reason why many African countries fight, is because we are states. Very few of African countries are actually nations. The way they were demarcated during the colonial times, it was more because of the ease of the colonizers, other than the homogeneity of the people on whose borders were being carved. And I don't think Jeff trying to bring about 5 gentlemen to sit on the high table is sorting out the issue of inclusivity and the issue of everyone feeling they are part and parcel of Kenya. Across the world, and you know many countries, including Switzerland, has the issue of tribes and ethnicities. If you try to look at historically how economies and how countries have overcome this, it is actually through industry. When you build industry, people move from rural areas. They come to urban areas. When a person moves from my place, a village called Gadukeine, another one moves from Nyando, another one moves from coast, they come to work in urban areas, the fault lines of ethnicity continues to diminish. And we approach having other identities that are a bit more mobile, based on economy, based on skills, based on education levels, based on work. And I think those kind of identities are much better to build a cohesive economy, a cohesive country, than trying this issue of superficial parchments, of bringing 5 men and purporting when one becomes president from this region or this ethnicity, the other one becomes the deputy, the other one becomes the prime minister, that the country will be one and united. Well, what do you do to the other that is something, other identities in terms of ethnicities that remain out there in the court?
Okay, Mheshimiwa, let's talk about that expanded executive. There are people who are very opposed to it.
Well, Jeff, first things first, I've listened to my brother parade some pedantic figures in the name of trillions of this and that and that. You know, Kenyans don't just wake up, walk idly by and start fighting each other. And if he's talking about the inclusion in higher positions or talking about identity, right now, I know, Jeff, where you come from. I know where Ndindi comes from. But we are not fighting. The problem bedeviling this country is a stolen election. Simple. Between elections, we don't fight. But why do Kenyans erupt after elections and start fighting each other? Because when they cast their votes, the results are not reflective of their, desire. We start tabulating results, and we know what happens at the borders of Kenya. So once Kenyans have detected an anomaly, such as which is characteristic of our elections, it invites war. And that is why I said we have a charged election before, during, and after. And that is where the problem is. And the Prime Minister and President Uhuru Kenyatta are saying, let us not prefer band-aids. Let us go deep and depth of the problems that affect us as a nation. And we are saying no investor, local or foreign, would put his monies in a country that you are not sure of what is going to happen 1 year before elections, during elections, and 1 year after. That by the time they settle down to do real business is 2 years wasted behind us. You cannot catch up as a nation. And monies are not plucked on trees. That when you talk about the economics, you don't talk about printing money, which we can do. Yeah, but what will be the value of that money? So money has to be juxtaposed with another. And that is why it is 109 shillings to $1 now. So meaning American dollar is very stable. So money is not something that you are not going to just create. You have to create wealth. And creating wealth is about investments. And one matter that affects our investment is our unpredicted elections. So they are saying, let us look at all the issues that have surrounded us and have brought us to where we are today and try to address them.
And will those 5 positions solve anything?
Well, to a larger extent, they will. I mean, we had a hybrid system here just during the Grand Coalition government, and he's very, very exact to say that during that period, Kenya did make a lot of money. We were able to offset lots of our loans, and unknown to many, the United Nations gave President Kibaki an award for reorganizing the economics of this country. So that worked then. If it worked then, why can't we prefer it now? But you know, there are people who are out here, people like my brother Ndindi and company, who have believed that right from the onset, the handshake was meant to push aside their boss, who is the deputy president. And that is what they have believed in. It has stuck in their minds until this day. And you know, everything would rather crumble as long as their man, who they have in mind, ascends to presidency.
But you don't think that's exactly what happened? I mean, Deputy President was kind of shoved aside. You don't think so?
Well, I remember when the President and the Prime Minister met and agreed on fundamentals, they said one thing that we must do is to confine our politics to the back burner until the year 2022. That is what they said.
Do you agree?
The Prime Minister,
do you agree?
In his role,
I don't agree with the many things that my brother is saying.
Someone walked into the bedroom and upset.
We had our opinions then. I think that is what are under the bridge. And I think the most important thing for us to do is to look at how we can make a better Kenya. But I also want to say that, Jeff, when I came to this show, I knew I'm coming with a very brilliant man. And I never came here for side shows. When you ask questions, I'm sure I have the points, and I don't need to engage our viewers with the side shows. I don't agree with many of the things that my brother said, starting from the issue of Kibaki investment, etc. First of all, the Kibaki regime had no debt to offset. You know, during the Moi regime, most of the international organizations and countries that would actually lend money to Kenya would not do so because our credit rating was too low. And therefore, the issue of how he's trying to patch in terms of investments and BBI, and of course invoking the name of Kibaki, I think it is far-fetched. The reason why the Kibaki regime was very good in terms of enterprise is because they were deliberate policies. Deliberate policies to empower the people of Kenya, deliberate policies to grow our entrepreneurs. And I think that is the reason why, Jeff, if you look for the 10 years of Kibaki, you can have many champions in terms of champions of the industry, in terms of personalities and organizations. It is during Kibaki's regime that you had new banks, like Equity Bank, like Family Bank, indigenous banks, coming from red. Some were actually less than banks, building societies. It is during Kibaki's regime that we actually listed Safaricom, and we saw many SOEs, state-owned enterprises, being privatized. I'm just trying to relate those 2 points because I need our viewers we move together with our viewers. If you compare the same, because I'm coming to the issue of BBI, if you come and compare the same to the last 9 years, Jeff, for the last 9 years or 10, which are fast approaching 10, you cannot name any single captain of the industry, a person who have emerged from enterprise to become something in this country, including the media house I'm in today, is actually what it is, partly because of the Kibaki regime. It was a small media house, like the many banks that have given and many enterprises that have given. If you compare the same now, for the last 9 years, try to juggle your mind, Jeff. Show me one personality, a Kenyan indigenous businessman who have been made out of the progress of our economy. Show me just one company that we can proudly say, this company came into Kenya, started 9 years ago, and it is doing very well. It is because Kibaki's regime was deliberate. Deliberate in terms of capital, deliberate in terms of access to credit, deliberate in terms of protecting our nascent even industries, manufacturing industries. And for you to succeed in that, you cannot do that by militarizing enterprise. The current scenario that we have in this country now is if somebody is perceived to be competing with the other, we use government instruments to suppress them. And Jared is here telling us the BBI has got cure for that. I have gone through the entire document. Jeff, the only part the BBI is talking about the economy is on what I started by saying, distributive economy. What I suggest and what I think we should be burning midnight oil with is the productive side of the economy. And I can give many examples. And the reason why I'm too much leaned on the economy is because I started by saying many chaos across the world, many countries descend and degenerate because people are fighting for resources. And of course, because of the fault lines of identity. This issue of resources, I am sure in our lifetime, we can be able to handle it. The reason why, Jeff, as I conclude, I'm saying that, is because we have peer countries that never engaged in such kind of processes like BBI. I am sure you are very well versed about a country like South Korea. From 1960, clear, concise policies of government led by General Park made the South Korean economy to grow by especially exports. Exports, because they came up with an export-led economy. They made the exports of South Korea to grow by 40% compounded per annum for 19 years when General Park was at the helm. It is the same kind of policies that I'm saying, deliberate policies, that made China from 1978 to become the economic giant it is now. It is the same kind of policies that were done in the US after the enactment of the Constitution, that were done in the Marshall Plan after the Second World War. I'm saying all this, Jeff, because I know when we get the economy right, we get the enterprise right, we can have so many people engaged in the productive side of the economy, and we will not have all these political shenanigans that we are trying to cure through a document.
Before I go to you, Mheshimiwa, you're speaking as though you're not part of Jubilee. You've been part of Jubilee for the last 9 years. You're speaking like you're not a part of it. Jeff, you're saying this regime, this regime.
Jeff, I'm sure you are forgetting that you just said that I'm a first timer.
Yes.
I'm a Jubilee member of parliament.
You are.
But the Jubilee we elected in August 2017, I am sure you know it is a different government from the one we have after handshake. I am also sure you know that the democratic space within Jubilee and within the leadership of our country is curtailed to a level where anyone, including Jared, with brilliant ideas on how we can take our country forward, has got no space. And therefore, we are just left to this kind of engagements. We try to do what we can in parliament, but I believe probably in future, we'll have a country where we can take up all kind of opinions, because once you open the table for many opinions, you are likely to have the best winning.
Why do they
That is not the case currently.
Why does Tanga feel so left out? What is it? Explain to me.
Yeah, well, before I get there, Jeff, our contemporary society makes business women and men on a daily basis. The Mama Mboga in my local market in Uthu, in Ahero, selling her wares is making money, and that money ends up in Nairobi in form of taxation. and that is what builds a nation. So it would be wrong to say that we have not made any business people of repute. No, they are there. And you don't have to necessarily look at the balance sheet from various banks to determine a successful business person or not based on the figures, that this is a 6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure. No, that is not how you look at economics. Everybody plays a pivotal role towards the enhancement of our economy on a daily basis. So when the handshake came into being and the government identified loopholes, those who do not remit their taxes in good time, or those who just refuse to pay taxes. So when the government is asking these questions and pursuing them to play their cardinal responsibilities, because a country is made by taxes the world over. You know about the United States of America. Biden just said, let us tax a little more those who have and make it a little lesser for those who do not, so that at least everybody develops on that pedestal. And so President Uhuru said, there are so many people here who are tax evaders. So what are we going to do? Let us pursue them and ask them to do what is right. And when they say that, when Uhuru said that and they started looking at businesses that have not paid taxes, they call it militarizing business community. I mean, you just have to play your responsibility. Unless you applied for tax exempt and Treasury looked at your documents and authorized, then we can be talking about something else. But every Kenyan pays taxes, including the president and the deputy president. Now, coming to Tanga. By the way, you cut me when I was driving a very fundamental point on BBI. Since the handshake and the advent of the BBI process, Tanga went all around the country telling people how bad that thing is and it will not see the light of day. Now, it went to the counties firstly when it left the secretariat to IBC and to the counties, and the figures vindicated us, 42 against 47. Now it came to us in Parliament, and the same propaganda was being peddled, that, you know, this is going to die on the floor of the House. 248 versus 63. For the first time in the history of this country, Parliament has never had such a super majority on any matter, even when they have to vote for their own benefits. Like there is a time they were advancing a theory in the last Parliament of having Parliament be postponed, the death of Parliament to be postponed. They couldn't marshal the 2/3, which is only 175. We have made attempts to, put the women agenda on the works as is espoused in the Constitution. We have failed. But for the first time in the history of this country, we got 248 against 63 from Tanga. And by the way, when the push came to shove, they started leaving one after another. I didn't see Ndindi when we were going for the real vote and after the third reading. So, of course, just as you rightly said, it was going to go to the referendum either way. Whether we passed it or failed to pass it, it was going to go to the referendum. But all these are about optics. What would Kenyans be saying if Bunge, National Assembly, has defeated the BBI? That was going to mark the death of this document. But now everybody is emboldened. They are ready to receive this document because it has been passed by the county assemblies and the National Assembly. And look at what happened in the Senate.
51 to 11.
Yeah, look at that. So Kenyans are eagerly waiting for this document to give it an endorsement.
Okay, real quick before the break, Mheshimiwa, what do you have to say?
I think it's what I'd call Pyrrhic. I don't want to call it Pyrrhic victory because there was no victory. But Jeff, I am sure you've been here for quite some time and you have traveled with Kenyans through the entire process. We are told that this is a popular initiative. And I wonder popular with who? Because for anything that is popular, you don't need to bulldoze people and intimidate people and bribe people. And I have reasons to say that because they are in the public domain. When BBI was first introduced in the Mount Kenya region, Of course, people went to Sagana. You covered that story. And you know, by the time everyone was leaving, there was a bahasha. There was some bribe. There is no other name to call it.
Do you have evidence? You have evidence.
Number two, Jeff.
Jeff, you're not going to use such a reputable media house for individuals such as Didi to peddle.
You have your time. I respect your time.
And who received
and I'm not interjecting.
Speaking of bribing, you've been accused of that yourself.
I will do that, Jeff. If evidence is needed, I'll give it. People went to Sagana, and those who are watching, they know they left with the hefty envelopes. From there, it is in the public domain, citizen covered, that our MCAs were able to get something sizable. And I commend them, by the way, because they were able to buy each of them a new car of 2 million shillings. After that, Jeff, we went to Parliament. And in Parliament, I've been summoned there tomorrow. I don't want to table my evidence now, but I can tell you that people voted for 3 reasons. Actually 4. One reason, there are many people who voted out of their conscience. They felt this is the right thing to do, either yes or no. There is a big proportion that voted on the basis of their stomachs. And I'll be tabling that evidence tomorrow because I've been summoned by the speaker. And I have the evidence that there was some cashier somewhere, and I am sure people benefited. Number 3 is that some people were voting on the basis of what their party leader says. Party leader, when they make a call, you have to do this or that. Of course, salute, yes sir, yes Baba. And I'm not referring to the former Prime Minister.
You just said Baba.
Yeah, most of them are Babas.
Talking about William Ruto, who asked him to go the other way.
The other 4th thing is, of course, regional interests. There are those people who voted on the basis of their regional interests. Out of that, I had my brother Jared trying to tabulate the numbers. Number 1, I'm sure, Jared, you know that I was there up to the last minute, but I'm not trying to justify myself. And there are so many people who are trying to drive this narrative to put politics in 2022 into it. And I am sure you have seen headlines. And probably that is what you are referring when you want me to comment on that. That this tanga that, these numbers that, in terms of political leanings. In the first, second reading, we had 83 votes, as in the no. Jeff, I want to tell you that from the time this BBI process began, you can search anywhere. As a Tagataga in Hustler Nation, we decided there are other things to do in this country. And we left that agenda to those people who know the benefits. And we said we are not going to consume our energy on something we know that is not priority. And when the time of voting came, and when we have been deliberating around it, as in the Hustler Nation, you know, it's a democratic organization. And like where Jared is, they removed the senior counsel, your friend, Otiende, just for having a slightly divergent opinion from the party leader. Of course, you know, Jubilee, it is either you are given a bahasha. Let me finish. Let me finish, Jeff. It's either in Jubilee, you are either given a bahasha, you are either sent a DCI, and those who are strong enough, of course, they withstood. In the Hustler Nation, we did what we did in 2010 during the real constitutional moment.
Which was?
Where Kibaki was president, the person who was leading the no campaign was his minister for higher education. There were 4 ministers saying yes. Cabinet ministers, the equivalent of cabinet secretary now. The current cabinet secretaries, leave alone being in no, even if they are perceived to be friends of people who are insinuated to be no, something is meted on them, which is not very pleasant. I mean, the current Kenya we are talking about, you cannot come to celebrate here. What are you celebrating? There is nothing to celebrate.
Jeff.
People have been voting either through a bahasha or barrels of guns. Okay. And you know Jeff. It, Jeff. You have covered MCAs, you covered Sagana. I will be tabling evidence in Parliament. People have been receiving money, if not intimidation.
Okay, Mwesh, your turn.
Jeff, barring any citing on contempt on sub judice, the rule, he will be presenting his evidence, if he has any, tomorrow. But he has only affirmed one thing, that their wing of the coalition of Jubilee would receive phone calls from their superiors in order to vote a particular fashion. There is no any better place he knows than Tanga wing of the Jubilee coalition. So indeed they received phone calls to vote against the BBI document, and he has confirmed it here. Only that the phone calls were not made to many. They were only made to 63 people, and they left out people like myself that constituted the 248. Tanga wing has been riding on innuendos and propagandas, and they have moved across this country sowing seeds of discord, expressing their utter hatred for the handshake, which to a larger extent has stabilized this country. And they wanted to use this as a platform to the next year's general election, that if the people down there in the county assemblies were going to reject this and to be followed by the National Assembly, they were going to come flat out to start campaigning against this document towards the referendum. But now that all the antennae are up and they have seen how this is going to pan out when it goes to the people, they are now saying, by the way, they have never talked ill about the BBI. And I have heard them say this numerous times since Thursday last week, because they know they're going to get a thrashing of their lifetime, and that is the momentum that we are going to ride on towards 2022.
What about what Mheshimiwa says about ODM? You cannot go against what Baba says, or the leadership.
Like what did he say?
Well, maybe Otiende Amolo.
Well,
he was speaking about how he was opposed to some parts of BBI.
Well, I do not speak for Otiende Amolo, and I don't hold brief for him. But what happens in Parliament, and my brother Ndindi knows, we usually have periodic reorientation of committees in Parliament. So and even when this was happening, it affected so many people, actually 7 in number, including my friend Honorable Anthony Lodge, who was moved from PIC to another committee. So when the document was going through JLAC, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, Otiende wasn't part of the JLAC committee. But we needed our people who understand the legalese and also understand the constitutional making process.
More than Otiende Amolo?
Such as Otiende Amolo. That is why we took him there as ODM party. He was in JLAC. Okay. But you remember that at the time we are speaking now, this thing is beyond JLAC. And by the way, it is beyond Parliament now. So of what use is Otiende Amolo again in JLAC when he has delivered on the mandate he was sent to go and carry out?
Jeff,
so this thing is now going for a referendum.
Yes.
And by the way, Otiende is also a member of the Public Accounts Committee. And he's not been de-whipped from Public Accounts Committee because we understand the magnitude of work.
But he was de-whipped from JLAC, you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's done his job. And we applaud him and we are very happy. Now he can help Opio Wandai concentrate on looking at the figures at PAC.
That shows you one thing.
It has got nothing to do with the BBI rejection.
Go on.
Because sometimes we as politicians can be masters of deception. I mean, the whole country,
you are.
we know for sure the abilities of the senior counsel. And there is no doubt about the reason why he was moved from that committee. But even from the explanation of my brother, I am sure you have picked a few things. Number one, I want to reinforce what I said before. Hustler Nation, you know we are vocal. We know how to speak for ourselves. If we needed to take a position, as a bloc, as an organization, we would have done it. We just told our people, this is not our priority. Still, it is not my priority now. That is why I voted no. But also the voting pattern can show you something. There are people who voted for the BBI. The following day, they were on Citizen TV saying, but I'm still Hustler Nation. I want to reinforce
referring to people like Kimani Gojiri?
Like Kimani Gojiri. Yeah. I want to reinforce that fact. We are not a cult like the many organizations we see around. We are a democratic organization. That is why we say within our organization, in such matters, which is not our priority, anyone can take their opinion and run with it. You can vote whichever way that suits you.
All right,
but it is also fundamental for viewers to know,
I
because
know
it
you're
is
gearing for a
because
break,
it
Jeff,
is in the
but this is
public
just
domain
one point.
that it's not everyone in Parliament, it's not every MCA who voted out of the magnanimity of their conscience.
Okay.
Majority of them.
Just one point as you get towards going for a break.
My sign language interpreter, you see her over there?
Right.
Her hands are
she's
falling
tired.
off.
Well, he's just mentioned through you, Kimani Ngunjiri,
Yeah.
a very good friend of mine from Nakuru. And he's saying he has some evidence to the effect that money exchanged hands in order for the BBI to go through. How much did Kimani Ngunjiri get in order to vote yes?
How do we
if
know?
at all.
How do we know?
If at all.
How do we know?
If at all, Jeff.
Wow. First timers on the bench, folks. These guys. You
And
guys are-
001, what is his name? MP 001. Ole Sankok.
Yes.
He voted yes.
Jeff,
How much did he get?
You can't start,
How much
you
did he
cannot
get?
start a debate about nominated members, and you know better.
We are all equal
You
in
know
the
better
house.
for sure.
We are all equal.
So what happened to Isaac Maura then?
We are all equal.
I have seen on Citizen during the news,
It's a good thing you watched it.
because the kind of jubilee that we have, the party we have now, has become so crude that they are punishing people with disability, women, and
But you just said
all
they
right,
are
let's take-
inconsequential.
vulnerable.
You just said nominated are
We're
inconsequential.
going to take a break.
Oh
It's
my
a great
goodness.
show.
He's
It's
walking
great
back
debate.
on his own word.
Keep tweeting. We'll be back in a moment. Eula, get some rest.